Welcome to our live training session here with our supercharged LS swapped 944 Porsche. We're going to be learning how to calibrate and tune this vehicle using a Holley Terminator X standalone system. Let's jump into some details about this vehicle. We're going to find that it has an LS swap. It's going to be a 5.3 liter stock bottom end. The cylinder heads have been ported, they have upgraded lifters, push rods, valve springs, and the engine has an upgraded camshaft. It's a Summit Performance Stage 2 forced induction camshaft. It has a 92 mm throttle body with a stock intake manifold. So the engine has been modified, but it's relatively mild modifications that have been done. Now, on the exhaust side of things, we have shorty headers to a Y pipe to a 3-inch exhaust. It has a custom supercharger kit that's going to be having an air-to-liquid intercooler, so everything here is just kind of a one-off custom application. It also has, on the fuel system side of things, 1500 cc per minute snake eater performance injectors, dual Bosch 044 pumps, and we're running a flex fuel sensor, so we're going to be learning how to calibrate and tune this on both 93 octane and on ethanol. We have a lot to cover here. Let's jump into our very first video, taking a look at how to create our base map so we can get the engine fired off and running and begin our live training process. Welcome to our live training session here with our supercharged LS swapped 944 Porsche. We just went over all the details of the vehicle. Let's jump into our Terminator X software so we can create our base global file. We can upload to the Terminator X and get our engine fired off to start our tuning process. So the first thing we need to do is jump into the Terminator X software. I have that open. I'm working with the 2.0 Terminator X software right now. I'm going to go in here to Open Global File. It's going to allow me to select one of the Holley supplied global files that'll be a bit more specific to our application here. We could go in to create a brand new global file. It's creating a file from scratch. We don't need to go through all that process. We'll find that the LS engines are pretty supportive from Holley, so we'll find that we have something that we can choose to start off with. So this is exactly what you're going to probably be into if you're going in and you have an LS swap or even a Ford engine or a Chrysler engine, depending on what your application is going to be. You'll be able to go into global file and select something that's relatively similar if you're having a plug and play Terminator X setup, which you should if you're buying everything through Holley. Let's go to the Open Global File option here, and we're going to go into our base cals folder. Click OK here, and we're going to jump now into a GM specific folder. So we see Hemi, Ford, GM, and there's throttle body injection. We're going to jump into the GM, and then we have under here some subcategories. We're looking at the LS base. We have a 5.3 liter engine in this. We're going to go to the LS base option. Now in here we have a whole bunch of different choices. We're dealing with a supercharged engine. We're dealing with a GM Gen 3 engine that has a 24-tooth crank trigger wheel. The GM Gen 4s have a 58-tooth crank trigger wheel. So if we're taking a look here at all the different base files we have available, we're seeing we have 24X, 58X. 58X is going to be a GM Gen 4 engine. 24X is going to be a GM Gen 3 engine, so we select the file specific to the engine type we're working with. Now in this case, looking for anything that's 24X and supercharged. So looking at this, we have one here, 24 drive-by-wire. It doesn't say it's supercharged. Here's one, supercharged 24X MPFI LS. This looks like it's a good choice. Looking through here, here's another one. It's supercharged, but it's going to be for a 4L80 transmission, so automatic transmission control. We're not working with that. This is running actually a manual transmission. It's a Porsche transaxle. It's in the car, so we don't need to do anything with that. And we're not drive-by-wire, so this looks like it's probably the best option here. Supercharged 24X MPFI. Down here in the notes, we see it's a 24X pattern, supercharged 6.0 liter. This is a 5.3. 3-bar map sensor. We have a 2.5 bar map sensor. FIC 1650s. We have Snake Eater 1500s. And then input-output ICF has been added onto the file. This should be a reasonable starting point. So we'll go here and click Open, and we will start to take a look at this file. Now the first thing I want to do is add on any ICFs that anticipate potentially needing to edit to create my base file. We have fuel sensors, system ICF, idle, spark, input output. Now we have a flex fuel sensor that we have to go and set up here for flex fuel control. Under the input outputs, we need to go in, and actually that's going to be where we add on the flex fuel sensor. We also, under toolbox, we go to add individual config. We need to go to advanced and grab our default advanced file for this application because we need to set up the actual flex fuel tables. They're not present in the software. We have to actually create them, so we'll go through that process here in the video. Let's click OK. So now we have all of the ICFs that we need, and we're ready to take a look here and working and moving into our system ICF. This is going to allow us to focus in on the key details of the setup in the background, making sure that everything is accounted for, that when we're firing up the engine, it's going to be in the correct fuel mode, the correct number of cylinders and displacement are going to be displayed here in the software, and everything's going to work and function properly. We need to make sure we're accounting for all these details that do make a relatively large difference. So jumping in here to our system parameters, and first under ECU configuration, we have a Terminator X, not a Terminator X Max. We're going to select that option under engine parameters here. Number of cylinders is 8. Engine displacement,
it's a 5.3 liter, not a 6 liter. So this is important. We're going to change that to 5.3 liter. Load sensing, we see there's a VE based option. We also find speed density, it's fuel flow rate based. We have alpha N, that's TPS based. Combo is speed density alpha N combination. And then VE combo is alpha N and VE based combination. We're going to be just tuning in VE based. That's all we need to do for the supercharged engine. It has a relatively mild cam. If you have a really wild camshaft installed that has really bad vacuum, you might want to go and choose alpha N as your option for calibrating and tuning. That sets your load scale into your actual fuel table based on throttle position. It gives you a little bit better way to calibrate and tune the engine. It's a little bit more accurate. If the map sensor is just not going to be pulling good vacuum and having good resolution, we really can't use it. So in that case, you would use alpha N. In this case, I don't need to worry about any of that. I'm going to go after VE-based tuning because I should have a good map sensor reading with a medium-sized camshaft. It's going to say by selecting this, it's going to reset some of the tables in the background. We'll say yes, that's fine. Fuel type here, we see fuel pivotal options, gasoline E85. This is setting the background stoichiometric multiplier for working with our fuel table. Now, this is important that we select the correct option that we're working with here. Now, if I'm doing pure E85 tuning, select E85. If I'm doing just petrol fuel, so pump gas, I'm going to be selecting gasoline. If I'm doing flex fuel, where I'm going to be using a flex fuel sensor to measure the ethanol content, we're going to be selecting gasoline as our option and then creating a subtable to modify and to work with to tag on the flex fuel control. We're not going to choose E85. By choosing E85, this has a background multiplier for the pulse width, the injector pulse width, that's going to scale everything up by a factor of about 35-40%. We don't want to choose that. We want to choose gasoline because that's what we're going to start off with. That's what our main fuel table is going to be based on. Everything's going to be for the fuel calculations based on a petrol fuel, pump gas, and then we're going to go in and drain it and then do flex fuel control and then being able to compensate for the flex fuel amount, register from the sensor, but we can't do that in the normal calculations here. So the fuel type will be left under gasoline if you're doing true flex fuel control. If you're running just strictly 85, you'll select that option here. It'll automatically scale things out in the background for you to make things a little bit more accurate. EFI system injection type multi-port is what we want to select. Fuel pump prime, this is how long the fuel pump is going to prime for, 5 seconds, that's fine. Actual fuel system pressure. In this case, I believe it's 58 PSI. It's running a Corvette fuel pressure regulator, which is still a returnless setup. Wideband O2 type, we see the Bosch is the option here. We want to have the injection and angle table as something we want to go and actually set up here. So let's go to edit table and dial that in. Now, this requires us to know a couple different things. We have to know the camshaft profile specs, and we have to know the injector placement, how far away the injector is from the intake valve. So I actually have the cam card information for the particular cam that's installed in this engine. It's a Summit Stage 2 turbo cam. It's a small, medium-sized cam. Putting in some of the data here, the intake duration is at 226, exhaust duration is 230, and then the LSA is a 113. Now, by knowing the durations in the LSA, it can backfill the opening and closing specs. So that's how we can kind of work with this. Now, the injector placement on an LS is anywhere between, if I remember correctly, 4.5 to 5 inches. I'm going to use 5 inches as my go-to here. And then I'm going to go to recalculate and click yes, and it's going to start to recalculate some values in here. Now, these are going to be starting points. We're going to come back in here and learn how to optimize these. So don't worry about if they're not exact, as long as you have something in there that's reasonable starting point, not 0. So we have something a little bit more reasonable based on the cam profile we're dealing with. We can optimize this a bit further. So this is a good starting point, but it may not be exactly perfect. So we'll start off with this, we'll use it, and then we'll experiment with learning how to go and calibrate this a little bit later in our video doing the part throttle tuning. All right, so engine parameters should be all good now. Actually, no, we have our fuel injector information we need to account for. Now, these are Snake Eater 1500cc injectors. I do not have injector data here, and a lot of times you're going to be dealing with injectors you don't have data for. What we're going to do is learn how to calibrate the injector data to be able to go in and actually fill in this injector off time, or the latency, or the response time of the injector. Looking down our list, we want to choose something that's as close as possible to the injectors that we're dealing with. So we're finding here we have a bunch of different options. Actually, we have SEP, Snake Eater Performance 1500s. So that's something that I didn't see in there before. This must be newly added to the software. So we're actually going to run with these injectors. This is going to give us hopefully the correct injector off time. The injector flow rate should be accurate. These injectors are rated at 43.5 psi. Minimum opening time is 1 millisecond. Injection strategy is sequential. In this case, it looks like we do have these as an option in our drop-down menu, which is awesome. It makes the process a little bit simpler. If you don't have the injector data, you can go through and actually figure it out in the VE style tuning. We'll talk about that because even though the injector data here is in the wizard, does not mean that it's accurate. I never trust injector data 100%. because we might find there's some deviations or discrepancies in what's going on with the fuel delivery. We can correct that if we know what we're looking for, so we'll talk about that once we get into the next video where we get the engine to fire up and run on the Terminator X. But for right now, we have some kind of a default value we popped in there that's going to work. It's going to give us that wizard value that we can simply select from the drop-down menu, which makes our life a little bit easier. Under ignition parameters, we're going to find ignition.
Thanks for checking out our teaser clip. If you want to see the rest of this video and more than 500 hours of current EFI training we have to offer, make sure you click right here. If you want to go and check out more teaser clips from this training course, click here, and you don't want to miss any of the videos we're going to be releasing on this channel, so make sure you subscribe and click here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.